placing a lollipop stick into the center of some PVC pipe and then filling it with some hot glue. After letting it dry, we can cut off most of the lollipop stick and then drill in a couple of holes. Now we have a replacement. A screen window is a must, especially during the summer. Unfortunately, this screen isn't super easy to install. We can make a plastic tab like this one to help. Simply lift up this rubber spline using a flathead screwdriver and put our tab underneath and push everything down into the slot. Now we can install our screen from the inside. This nozzle is cut a little too small to apply our sealant quickly. Let's modify the nozzle. First we'll melt the tip and seal it shut. Then we'll make a vertical incision along the nozzle. Now we can apply a much thicker layer faster. And once we're finished, we can seal everything up with a bit of duct tape. We don't want the raw wood to be exposed on our baseboards, so we'll cut everything to look a little bit more professional. We can cut clean 45-degree angles to the baseboard on both ends. Now we can line up the ends to form a neat angle. Tape the two ends together, then flip it over and add a piece of double-sided tape. This will keep our end piece secure. Sometimes we need a small foam brush to paint our projects. We can make one by hot gluing a pencil to a binder clip and then cutting off a piece of sponge for the brush head. Apply the paint like so. When finished, replace the old sponge with a new one. Here we're tying a prusik hitch, also known as a prusik knot. It's a rather useful knot because it's simple to tie and simple to untie. It stays secure under tension and it moves freely when not under tension. Besides being used in rock climbing, it's especially useful for tying rope to fixed posts. Now we're going to be joining these two beams together in a relatively simple way. We'll make some marks to match the width of the crossbeam and make another mark halfway deep. Next, we'll remove this section by making multiple cuts into the wood with a saw. Now we can break off the remaining clips. Then we can smooth out the bottom of our cut with either a miter saw like so, or simply by using a chisel. Now we'll use two screws to make our marks into both pieces of the wood to drill holes for dowels. We can use a pencil to make it easier to see the indents. Drill holes on the indents and install the dowels. Next, we'll add two more dowels into the corners, ensuring that the hole that we drill is angled. This is called a pocket hole. Fill the hole with glue and hammer in the dowels. Next, we'll saw off the ends of the dowels that are sticking out. Let's move on to our next project, which will be adding a depth stop to our hand saw. Start by cutting out a rectangle piece of wood that's the length of the saw blade and cut it about half its width. Next, we want to cut out two notches that are the same width as the bolts we'll be using to attach the depth stop to the saw. It's easier if we drill holes first and then saw out the remainder of the notch. A little bit of sanding wouldn't hurt either. Place the wood onto the saw blade and then make two marks in each notch. The higher the better. Using a center punch, we can make sure our drill stays lined up. Drill the holes into the saw blade. Slide one bolt into each hole, then place our depth stop, and lastly add a washer and a wing nut to each bolt. Now we can adjust our depth stop to the height that we need. It seems like this clothespin is unable to pick up this nut, but we can make a little adjustment to turn the clothespin into a handy pair of tweezers. Remove the spring and flip the sticks inside out. Reattach the spring, and now our tweezers can pick up all sorts of little things. Here's a fun little party trick using matches and a syringe. First, take the syringe apart. Dispose of the needle properly. Take a box of matches and cut out the rough side of the matchbox. Roll the cutout around the tip of a match. Next, we'll wrap it multiple times using tape. It matches the width of the inside of the syringe. Place the match and the tape inside the syringe. Now, just slam the plunger down onto the table to ignite the match. Here we have a piece of ribbon that's cut. Instead of gluing it, we can tie it together using a simple overhand knot. Pass the second piece of ribbon around the knot like so. For our last project, we'll be making an adjustable wrench by welding together a few nuts and bolts. First, we'll secure a square tube in our vise and then weld a nut onto the end. We can grind down some of the rough edges using an angle grinder. Next, we'll put 2 nuts onto an extra long bolt, spaced about 2 inches apart. Secure one of the nuts near the end of the square tube with a clamp, and then weld both nuts onto the square tube. Now we need to make a fixed jaw, also known as the top of the clamp. To do that, we'll cut off a piece of scrap metal in the shape of an L. Now we'll weld this piece. Again, we'll grind off some of the rough edges with an angle grinder. Now we can use it just like a normal wrench when you don't happen to have the exact size wrench or socket for the job. Just twist the bolts according to the size that you need. It can even be used for abnormal shaped objects. We'll share all of this and more today on Workshop Insider. We'll cut out the damaged part of this vinyl floor and a new piece to match. Then glue the new piece down so that it's flush. We can use a broken screw as an anchor to another screw. Sometimes we need our bolts to be a bit more secure so no one can unscrew them. In this case, we'll use blind rivets. Now they're not so easy to remove. Our vinyl floor is a bit loose here. We can drill a hole in the vinyl floor and fill it with wood glue. Now we'll cover the hole by melting a crayon and then shaving it flat. To securely pack fragile items, we'll need to place our item between 2 layers of spray foam and plastic wrap like so. Our item is ready to ship. We can also repackage the item like so for multiple shipments. Leave a brush in the paint bucket and it'll start to sink. We can mark out a little notch and then remove it using a handsaw. Now the brush will hang on the rim of the paint bucket. Putting duct tape on wood before cutting will keep the wood from splintering. Use a utility knife to cut the duct tape in the shape that you need. Now we'll cut along the edge with a jigsaw. And our wood has not splintered. We can even use a plastic straw to anchor this screw. Drilling into drywall can create a lot of dust. We can use this plastic bottle as a shield to collect the dust. Now when we drill, any dust falls into the cap. How can we prevent this marker from constantly rolling? Simply add a zip tie to the end. Water that's left on the ends of these shovels will cause the metal to rust. We can prevent that by filling a bucket with sand and motor oil. Now if we set our shovels inside the sand after working, the oil will prevent them from rusting. Sometimes the clamping pressure and too much wood glue causes the boards to slide. We can use a bit of salt to keep the boards from sliding. We'll learn how to make our own dowels in this next project. Start by cutting out 2 quarter circles. One needs a hole about the size of the dowels, and the second needs a large hole. Attach the boards to a stud like so, with the router in between. Now we can pass the square dowel through and round it to size. The mortise and tenon joint is one of the strongest joints that we can make to secure these 2 pieces together. We'll start by making the mortise. We'll mark the exact center and then use our mortise router, making multiple passes to cut it out cleanly. Next, we'll make the tenon. We want to make sure that it fits snug, so we'll never cut past our marks. We can remove most of the wood using our table saw, cutting the sides and the bottom. It should come out like this. We'll remove the rest of the wood using a chisel and sandpaper. Now our pieces fit nicely together, snug, and everything lines up. Our last project for this video will be a handcrafted curtain holder, made out of this log and the extra piece of scrap wood. We'll start by drilling a hole into the center of the log and cutting out a large hole in the center using a hole saw drill bit. Then we'll cut off a round about 1 inch thick. We'll want to sand off the bark of our circle piece, and also sand off the edges of our straight piece. We'll end up with 2 pieces that look like this. We'll apply varnish to both pieces and let them dry. Pass the curtain through the circle piece and then lock it in place